All right, Liz,
Yeah.
we make a call for quorum?
Yep. Chief McManamy, we do have a quorum if you want to do roll call.
Okay, first I'd like to welcome everybody to the Maricopa Regional 911 Oversight Team Meeting. We'll do a roll call. When I call the jurisdiction, please state your name so that we know who's on the call. So Jeff McManamy here from Glendale, Chandler PD.
Good morning, Michelle Potts.
Thank you. MCSO, Maricopa County. Mesa Fire.
John Laughlin, Mesa Fire.
Peoria PD.
Rob McDaniel, Deputy Director.
Thanks, Rob. Phoenix Fire.
Scott Walker, Phoenix Fire.
Thanks, Scott. Phoenix PD.
Jesse Cooper, Phoenix Police.
Thanks, Jesse. Scottsdale Police.
Good morning, Karen Sutherland, sitting in for Robert Bokinski.
Good morning. Tempe PD.
Patrick Cutts, I'm sitting in for Dave Humble.
Good morning. And Tolleson Fire. Okay, did we miss anybody that signed on late for the members? Okay, we do have quorum, so we're called the 911 Oversight Team Committee is called to order. We'll move on to call the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to the meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must have been received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Ms. Graber, have we received any public comments? And if so, can you read them at this time?
Chair McManamy, we have no public comments at this time.
Okay, then we'll move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Could I have a motion? Has everybody got meeting minutes and had a chance to review them? And if so, can we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Motion to approve. John Laughlin, Mesa Fire.
Okay, we have a motion from John. Do we have a second?
Scott Walker, I second that.
We have a second from Scott. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call to accept the minutes. We'll go in the same order, so you'll know when you're coming up. So Chandler PD.
Approved.
Glendale Fire approves. MCSO. Mesa Fire.
Mesa Fire approve.
Peoria PD.
Peoria PD approves.
Phoenix Fire.
Scott Walker, I approve.
Phoenix PD.
Jesse Cooper, approve.
Scottsdale PD.
Scottsdale's going to abstain.
Tempe PD.
Tempe PD
approved.
And Tolleson Fire, if you ever made it on. Okay, it does pass. We'll please log the minutes from the previous meeting. We'll now move on to the administrative reports. Liz, 911 administrator, can you please provide the report on the 911 administrator's PSAP activities?
Of course. So on our SANS launches, that's our reverse 911 launches, we have done, we're still ahead of the curve. We're up to 92 launches for the year. That puts us ahead. Usually the last couple of years, we've averaged around 92. So as of September, we're reading at 92. And this might be because of the COVID situation or possibly because of the riots that were happening or the protests. So it's good that we have that tool out there, and the PSAPs are using it. We changed to a new platform that's caused some hiccups with SENS, but actually that's text to 911. SENS has been doing okay. On our text to 911, we're also above, higher than what we have. We are averaging 512 a month text message sessions. Phoenix PD still being our biggest customer. We changed to a texting platform that has caused some problems with, we were having problems, so they upgraded their software. And so just working out the bugs for that. But so far, the PSAPs have been able to use the new software and send it through. Eventually, we're going to have to look at replacing what we have, whether we renew with the current vendor or we look at a more integrated solution. The first thing we always look at costs is what it's going to run us and what the usability of it. But we still, it's still doing really good. We have, especially during the pandemic, we've had text messages from that have increased of people needing help, and we were happy that we were able to respond. We are still monitoring the Arizona Corporation Commission for 911 outages. The Corporation Commission has an open docket in which they have talked to CenturyLink about having issues with outages. This has affected agencies outside of Maricopa region, but we run into issues trying to transfer calls to, for a good example would be DPS. DPS is on the CenturyLink system. They're not part of MR911. And so we have a difficult time transferring calls when there's a big outage. So the Corporation Commission is investigating past ones, but I'm sure this will be added to their docket. And I do monitor those meetings and just observe and see the decisions of the Corporation Commission. We are planning projects. We're scheduled this year to install Glendale Police's 911 equipment, Phoenix Fire's 911 equipment, and then we have Goodyear's 911 equipment, and then MCSO. So those are our fiscal year 21 projects. We've been given approval as we had in our last meeting for that funding through the state. The state 911 office has changed. They're looking for a new 911 administrator. They have not announced if they've selected anyone yet. There are good staff in there that are keeping us going. So despite not a leader in the office, they are able to handle all of the grant and different questions. And we're also in the middle of a statewide RFP. This RFP will help shore up the 911 services and equipment what was lacking in for the last few years on having a competitive bid for 911 services and for equipment. And we are participating in that, and we're really glad that the state has taken that on. Chairman McNeamy, that's the end of my report. Can I field any questions from the committee?
Liz, this is Jesse Cooper. Just a question. Are we still funding SINs through Homeland Security Grant Program funds?
No, we're getting ready to release that. We have, because of the change in platform, some of our costs are no longer required, and we've absorbed it in our 911 budget.
Thank you. I was just curious.
Are you, Jesse, are you on the committee that approves the grants through?
I am not now, so that's why I was just asking if it was still going through that process.
Well, thank you. I want to thank the Homeland Security Committee that put us forward to receive that. That was a lifesaver for the system and the program. So, but what through streamlining and different changes, we've been able to absorb that.
Very good. Are there any further questions?
Yeah, this is Karen Sutherland. Liz, do you have any information on the 911 outage from the weekend?
The weekend or?
For the state that was broadcast on the news, and we did get something from T-Mobile on it, but just very vague information. I'm wondering how widespread it was or what you know, if anything.
Oh. So this is the one from Monday.
Okay, yeah, it's been a long
Monday.
week. I'm sorry.
Yes, we all worked Monday, Karen. So, so what I have very preliminary information. They have not specifically released what caused it, but they're saying a third-party vendor. And it was affected most of southern Arizona, anybody that was on the managed platform. So some of the PSAPs in the frontier region, northern Arizona, were not affected. Most of southern Arizona was affected, and then DPS was affected as well. The state, it also was in Minnesota, Florida, Delaware. I'm sure there were other ones on there that I'm missing, Idaho. So it was a multi-state outage. From what I can tell from my colleagues outside of our region in Arizona, they were not receiving any 911 calls. So it's not like the calls went to another PSAP in a make busy or an overflow situation. It was the call just went anywhere. Now, whether a third party called them digitally, if they went to a third party and then the third party PSAP called the local PSAP, I don't know the details on that. I can tell you that our region was not affected. We had calls that come through, and when we got the word, we immediately started monitoring and continued until the outage was over, just to ensure that our call flow was not affected. And Karen, this brings up a side note. With the RFP process, one of the items that the vendors who are bidding, one of the challenges is to see how they can interface the network, the statewide network, into MR911's network. And our goal is, can we help our neighbors in Arizona not have a black hole of where 911 calls go? We're not sure what that looks like, but can we leverage what we have with what they have, and vice versa, so that when there is a massive outage with the network, that the calls get rerouted and however that looks.
Thanks, Liz.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Any other further questions? If not, we'll move on, and then you can ask Liz at the end of the meeting, so she'll catch you up. So moving on to item 5. The MAG fiscal year 2022 PSAP annual element funding request and fiscal year 2022 to 27 equipment program. The committee will be asked to review and recommend for approval the MAG fiscal year 2022 PSAP annual element funding request and fiscal year 2022-27 equipment program. The justifications were attached in the materials provided before the meeting. So Liz, will you provide us a report, please?
Absolutely. So what you're looking at on your screen now is a grid of all our 911 centers. And we actually went from a 5-year, which we've been doing forever, to a 6-year. And why we went to a 6-year is that it allows us to see, that's if we do approximately 4 projects a year, and Phoenix PD counts as 4 projects, but we do 4 projects a year. That is, with the resources I have with personnel, that's about all we can handle at this point. We can change out the equipment for all the PSAPs within a 6-year period. Our, I'm sorry about that. Our, the normal upgrade schedule for our hardware is 5 years, but we're able through good maintenance to make them go 6 years, and then that refreshes the equipment in an appropriate time frame. And so we changed it at that. In there you can see on the grid when everybody is due for an upgrade. So this is next fiscal year, not our current one. So you'll notice Fort McDowell, is slated to be upgraded in this budget, the 2022. Rural Metro AMR is going to be upgraded. Scottsdale is due for an upgrade, and Tempe PD is due for an upgrade. And so when the PSAP managers plan their forecasts of what projects they have, CAD, radio, they can see where their 911 upgrade, what year it's going to land. We also had them request if they needed additional workstations. And you'll notice in fiscal year 22, Gilbert asked for 3 additional positions. Mesa PD asked for 6 additional positions. They also asked for logging quarter reimbursements. Glendale, Goodyear, and Paradise Valley are all asking for this fiscal year. When you see the justification documentation, the PSAPs are only required to give for the next fiscal year. So all of those agencies in the column of fiscal year 2022 would have provided documentation justifying why they need the new position or the logging recorder. Any request in the fiscal years after that, for example, Apache Junction in 2023 wants an additional workstation, not necessary for them to turn in the equipment quite yet. They'll have to do it on the next budget cycle. Go ahead and go to the next frame, Jeremy. There we go. And so this is fiscal 2022's budget. And we have it broken down into the same format as we do for the state 911 grant system. So we mirror how the grant budget is set up, and it's into categories of wireline, wireless, next generation 911, administration, and then PSAP requests. So the total budget for fiscal 2022 is $10,810,286. And this includes all of the networking components that we use for delivering wireline and wireless, includes the personnel to maintain the 911 equipment, and also our selective routing. Remember, we do our own network. We do our own selective routing of 85% of the calls. So 15% come from CenturyLink, 85 comes from our system. So that falls under the NG 911 budget. Administration is for a budget, personnel, and different costs that the grant does not cover. And PSAP requests are the ones that were for the fiscal year 2022. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, we have those projects outlined. We have the 911 on the far left, 911 CPE projects. Those are the upgrades. So you can see that we have 1.7 million in upgrades. We have next generation projects. We're always looking at our security and making sure our equipment is upgraded so that we don't ever have any issues with outages. And then the last column is PSAP requests, and you can see Gilbert's request for positions. Gilbert wants reimbursement on a login recorder. Glendale wants a login recorder reimbursement. Goodyear as well. Mesa PD wants a login recorder reimbursement, and Mesa PD wants 6 positions, and Paradise Valley is requesting login recorder reimbursement. So that's the fiscal year 2022 budget for the Maricopa region. Once this, whatever budget gets approved through the PSAP, through the MAC process, we will then take that budget, and when they open the grant up in January, I will apply all of the requests and everything that was approved into the grant process for the state to review, and then they will notify us usually the first part of April whether what we're granted, what monies were granted. So Chairman McMeeman, I'm happy to answer any questions. And also we have on the line Patrick Cutts. Patrick Cutts is Tempe, and he oversees the working group for the budget. If I can defer to him to give the input on what they determined as the working group reviewed the budget.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. Do we have any questions before we ask for a motion on the budget?
Jesse
Wait, wait, wait,
Cooper. Oh.
This is Scott Walker. Sorry, Jesse. One quick question. So Liz, I appreciate your 6-year forecast. Looks like a good plan to do that to make sure all of the needs for the region are being addressed in a reasonable time frame. I understand how you came up with your budget here. So then just to clarify, this is your projected budget for the next fiscal year. You'll submit this into the state in the what we call grant process. And based on what funding they provide to the region, you may need to adjust this budget. So I would assume those adjustments would come in, maybe not be able to meet some of the PSAP requests as far as upgrades and those types of things? Or is that, how would you address any shortfalls that may happen?
So when I fill out the grant and I put it in the categories, when they look at it, they'll have a meeting with me and they'll review, and they specifically cut. They don't say you're only getting this much money and then I decide where to cut. They'll say, we're not going to fund Gilbert's 3 positions. We're not going to fund an additional personnel position. They make the determination of what's going to be cut from the budget. I do have an opportunity to appeal to them and say, hey, you know, this is why. I've already given justification, but sometimes, you know, making my case before them, we can get some adjustments. We also have the opportunity of unspent monies that come up that we're going to review in January, that we can maybe request our budget overages to cover things that were cut. And so they do have a second chance, but that's basically the process it goes through.
Okay, that makes sense. One last question. Do we anticipate any, with the COVID and revenue projections, are you aware of what projections are? Do we anticipate any reduction in potential revenue we thought we might have been available for? Any indication on that from the state?
Well, we're always worried about budget sweeps because we've been a victim of it in the past. And for the next fiscal year, there has not been any indication of sweeps that occurred. But the state and all of myself and all the my peers are on high alert to help protect that money, because we can't afford to have a sweep on our funding, especially as we're trying to bring in a next generation 911 and new technologies, and the monies, everything, you know, comes at an increase. I'm sure all of your budgets has been impacted by things, just the cost of things going up a certain percentage, and we suffer from that as well. So they have said they're not doing sweeps. They don't anticipate them, but we are watching diligently to make sure that that's the case.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Jesse, did you have a question?
Yeah, Liz, is our logging recorders still, is there still a moratorium on funding logging recorders? And are they entertaining funding additional positions, or are those just requests if we can happen to put them in?
So both of those items are covered under the Arizona Code, administrative code, and it lists out what the 911 fund can pay for. And it does say a reimbursement of a portion of a logging recorder. So they don't pay all the logging recorders. Once an agency gets a logging recorder, then they prorate it, because a logging recorder, as you know, records radio traffic and multiple and admin lines, as well as 911. And the state is designed to only reimburse the 911. So what we do is we have the PSAP give us a copy of an invoice that they've already paid and installed it, and then we do a prorate it as a third of it that we'll reimburse them on if we have the money. So if you see on the budget, you'll see the Goodyear, Gilbert, those are percentages of the logging recorder reimbursements that they would have. And so that's how we come across it. The positions is a little bit harder. They are still, the moratorium was lifted because when we went to the grant process, but that doesn't mean that they're going to approve them. We've had those cut the last couple of times, additional positions. And so what one of the working groups we have within the PSAP is attempting to do is have come up with a formula, and that's very difficult because you have how many positions do we need to cover Phoenix PD's phone calls is much different than how many positions we need to cover Tollison's phone calls. And so we have to come up a way, they're coming up with a way to come up with a formula that allows us to judge them fairly. I can tell you that I did a report on by position 911 call answering, and there was a position at Phoenix PD that answered in a year, whoever was sitting there, it must be the favorite position, answered over 55,000 911 calls. And that's more 911 call volume than my smaller PSAPs take all year. So you have to be able to judge that. But then you have Tollison, who added in extra land with, they are working with Total Odom casino area. They provide 911 services for that. And so there overnight, their 911 call volume doubled. Now, even though it's not as much as Phoenix, we needed to be aware of that. So it's a very tricky situation on getting that formula down, but we really need to make sure that we're not extending, that we are funding positions that are needed desperately, and we're not putting positions in that aren't really needed. So that's a hard thing to come up with. And the state 911 office has asked if they could help participate on that committee so they could hear ideas and that they can use a formula as well for outside of the Maricopa region. So that's kind of how we're doing with positions. So we'll keep the committee briefed on how we come up with that. There's not a nationwide formula, so it may be that we get to be the leaders on coming up with a formula. Does that answer your question, Jess?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to understand how those were being handled with this new process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on the report itself? Okay, what we're looking for is recommended for the approval of the MAG fiscal year 2022 PSAP annual element funding request and fiscal year 2022-2027 equipment program. Do we have any motions?
John Lockton Mason, motion to approve.
I think a couple
Jesse
people
Cooper,
were
Phoenix,
they were
second.
talking, so.
I'm sorry, I missed it. So Chief Lockman, you motion to approve?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do we have a second?
Jesse Cooper, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion to approve the MAG fiscal year 2022 PSAP annual element funding request and the fiscal year 2022-27 equipment program? Seeing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Chandler PD.
Michelle Potts, approve.
Glendale Fire, approve. MCSO. Mesa Fire.
John Lockton Mesa Fire, approve.
Peoria PD.
Rob McDaniel, approve.
Phoenix Fire.
Scott Walker, I approve.
Phoenix PD.
Jesse Cooper, approve.
Scottsdale PD.
Karen Sutherland, approve.
Tempe PD.
Patrick Cutts, approved.
And Tolleson Fire. I saw George was online now.
Yeah, I am, Chief. Thank you. Yes, and Paulson approved.
Very good. So it looks like we have the motion has carried by everybody approved. So we'll move on to item 6. An ongoing discussion on emerging technology, best practice, innovative process in 911 and its impact to the region. Liz, would you like to give us a report, please?
I would be happy to, and because we have some PSAP managers that are on this call, if they want to chime in on anything I missed as I review the Emerging 911 Working Group report. Our emerging 911 working group originally was the technical working group to understand new technologies that were coming through to the PSAP, but we changed it when we found that there's also processes that are being changed. So it's just not studying 911 technical, it's studying processes as well. In there, we are looking at 911 mapping. That is a big thing that we use. Mapping started out as a incidental tool that we use for only about 30% of our calls. Now our 911 calls are driven by mapping because of the number of cell phones, voice over IP, and then with our process through Rapid SOS that gives us a smartphone location as well, supplemental data. And so as we are getting ready to go to the next level, we have to see how our map, which is currently a map that is provided by my team. It's the one that we have developed ourselves. We did it out of cost benefits, but as it turned out, that it turned into a bigger toll than what we had originally anticipated. We have this map at every 911 call taking position, and it allows us to provide location of 911 calls, its original benefit, but it also, we have set up a messaging. So for example, when we had the outage on Monday, the out of state, and DPS wasn't receiving our calls, we put out a message, a broadcast message that was a crawler across the bottom of the 911 map saying DPS is experiencing an outage, unable to transfer. And that hit every call taking position in the region at once. They're short, they're sweet. We don't use it for anything but emergency, but when we need to get the word out to the PSAPs, that's the quickest way to let them know that there's this problem. So the emerging 911 working group has talking about how can we further take the 911 map, make it more of a portal. What other information can we display on that screen that touches every PSAP that would help them in the 911 call flow? So agencies are starting to think more on a regional 911 instead of just individual PSAPs. They know more what their neighbors are involved in and things that would overflow into their agency. So it's an exciting time, and the emerging 911 technical group is looking at that. We're also getting more supplemental data information from our Rapid SOS partner. So they've introduced Uber. We remember Uber from a year or so ago, where if someone calls 911 while they're in the middle of an Uber ride, it will send data as the color, the license plate, information about the car, as well as its exact location. So it's that type of information that's been feeding into the PSAP. So it's just not the location and the voice like 911's been since I've been in the business. You're getting pieces of other information, medical alerts. So if someone has a medical file with a medical alert and they filed a phone number with them, when they dial 911, and it will pop up the information that's usually on the bracelet. They're diabetic, they're autistic, whatever that case may be. And so that's good that it passes on to the PSAP, more informational. Alarm systems, they're just starting with alarms where when an alarm's triggered, it notifies the PSAP as part of that. So data is coming our way, and how are we going to accept that? And that's what the emerging 911 working group has discussed. And I'm going to ask Michelle Potts from Chandler, were there other things that I've missed on that discussion?
So Rapid SOS is really hitting every emergency kind of component that we could imagine, and then some. I think they're hitting connected buildings, telematics, so crash detection. They went into a partnership with SiriusXM for crash notifications. So that's going to hit the the law enforcement side as well as the medical side on crash detections, Google Pixel phone crashes, they've already got that too. The connected buildings where you can unlock doors even from the PSAP, and then also gunshot detections from inside buildings or even visualize guns, so inside of school or something. That's where an actual business, they go into a partnership with the this gunshot detection, and then it will actually just route to us. So it's not something like ShotSpotter where we go into business with them and purchase it, but it will all immediately route into this portal. So I think the other piece that comes with this is that, you know, going back to the 911 outages, is that even when 911 goes down, all of this connectedness with the community, they're still communicating with us when 911 goes down. So if there's an emergency, you still have home security coming in, you still have personal safety apps coming in, you still have rideshare emergencies coming in, healthcare, wandering devices, panic buttons, they're all still coming into us even when 911 goes down. So there's alternatives, including text messaging, that could still come into us. So I think that's the benefit of having all of these coming in, and they're all coming in one portal, all one mapping, and we're still connected to the community even when our traditional 911 goes down.
Michelle, I want to add in, that was one of the things that we saw from our partners in Southern Arizona when they had that outage. Their blast to the public where 911 is not available, you can still text the 911. So, you know, I'll reach out and find out what kind of text volume they got during that time. But that's a good example of when something out, when 911 went out, an alternative is there. So with all of the things that we're looking at in the future, it's all IP based, and that's why we invest so much time and effort and security on the 911 network. We always make sure that we have diverse carriers, that not one carrier outage is going to take 911 down. We take special care on that, and the payoff is being able to continue 911 business during outage times. And so that's our report on emerging 911 technology. Chairman McNamee.
All right, thank you, Liz. Is there any questions on that?
Chairman, this is Scott Walker. One quick question. Not trying to monopolize. Liz and two of your other members are on here. How are we doing? Any progress on our Z coordinates? Reporting back to the PSAPs and how we're going to be able to display that? Anything moving on that?
I'll hit it, then Michelle, you can follow up with me. I know that the Z coordinate information is only coming through the supplemental location data, meaning the rapid SOS data, which is not every call. Wireless carriers, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and AT&T, they are not sending the Z coordinate at this time. So we're only as good as the data being sent to us. So the Z coordinate is something we want to incorporate. We also will have to change our mapping so that we go into a 3D mapping, because right now it's like a regular map where you see the flat map, but we'll have to be able to look at the buildings to see what floor it's on and be able to interpret that Z coordinate. Michelle, did I miss anything on that?
So we monitor that. Just, you know, we're fairly lucky in Arizona that we're somewhat flat. So we monitor what we can, especially when from an operational standpoint. I think from the national level, NENA is, they have a working group on that that is specific to Z access. And then I'm co-chairing a national committee on the supplemental location and data that's coming in that's going to be touching on some of the Z access. So I know the FCC is pushing on that for some finalized, and I can't speak to some of the specifics, but I know NENA is actively working on some of the specifics on what's needed from the carriers. So I could probably get some more information on that, but I know that the industry is coming out with some best practices on what that's going to look like.
All right, thank you. Now just looking for any kind of an update. That's good. Thank you.
All right, very good. Any further questions or anything? And let's just for the minutes, can we reflect that George Good Chief from Tolleson Fire, he was able to join the meeting for most of the voting portions of the meeting.
Yes, we've captured that. we're glad to have them on.
Alrighty, and we'll move on to item 7. Staff discussion on proposed bill introduced to Congress on the reclassification of 911 personnel and make certain revisions to the standard occupational classification system. We have that the discussion will be led by Shauna Henry from Goodyear PD. And Liz, will you be able to start us off on the report, please?
Yeah, and I apologize. It's Shauna, it's going to be me giving the report. And one of the, as we've heard throughout this whole meeting on how 911 is changing, we look at our classification at the federal level, and we are considered in their classifications a clerical personnel. Not that the clerical people are valuable, but we're not seen as emergency personnel. And so one of the congresswomen from California, who's actually a former 911 dispatcher, put forth a bill to have the OSB change us to a first responder classification, a civilian. So it's not taking anything away from our sworn members at all, but it's recognizing us as part of the emergency response for any sort of emergency. One of the other thing is all of the data analytics that the 911 operators are starting to have to, and the dispatchers are starting having to use. Chandler PD is a perfect example, monitoring cameras, incoming data. So the typing and listening to a call is going beyond that. As we've done for many years, it's now going to be analyzing data, more of a fusion center. So we are the state, not the state, but the region though has a working group that started, led by Shauna, to excuse me, review our classifications, and each PSAP, you might hear that if you have personnel in your PSAP personnel in your under your umbrella, that they're going to want to have a new title put in their name and be recognized as emergency personnel instead of clerical. Michelle or Patrick, did I get everything on that?
I think as a region, one of the things that we're doing to help, and Karen and Patrick, and then as well as Mason and Gilbert, what we're trying to do as an East Valley is try and come up with a more regionalized job description too. So we have some more common vernacular that's more up to date. And I think one of the new things that just came out of the national conference was an recommendation of emergency communications specialist is the new title for dispatchers and call takers. So I think we're going to start seeing some more of that. But I think if we start standardizing some of the training, the job description, and then updating it with the technology and more common vernacular, I think that's going to help some of it because of what came out of the federal OMB. So I think that's what we're working over in the East Valley to kind of help the cause. So.
So thank you. I called it OSB, right? It's OMB. Sorry about that. And so we'll be happy to entertain any questions from the committee.
No? Okay, well, seeing none, we'll move on to item 8, request for future agenda items. Are there any further comments or questions from the committee members? Are there any requests by membership for an item on the future agenda? Our next meeting scheduled for Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020.
Everybody, maybe I don't have a future agenda item, but I do have a final comment if you're moving on to that section, or if you've already moved to that section.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I would just like to just take a second and really recognize Ms. Graber and her group and how they really manage and service this region that we have. I think with the recent outage from CenturyLink that we just saw a few days ago across the country, and certainly in our own state, and other previous outages we've seen, I think that the work they do is really commendable, and the job and the resilience that they built into our system is one we should all be proud of, and our role supporting her. And I really wanted to make sure we recognize her in that group for what they've done to keep our region really operating in that IT world of 5 nines, where their system is not down and our community is being served and protected like none other, I would say, if you look across the country. So just really want to recognize Liz at this time.
Yes, thank you, Chief Walker. I echo those opinions. Any further comments?
Chief McNamee, on Wednesday, the December 2nd, does the committee feel like 9 o'clock is still a good time for a meeting so we can get that locked in for you?
I can tell you in 1 second here.
Our hopes are to have this 911 oversight meeting within a month of the PSAP meeting, so you are updated on everything that they discussed in the meeting prior.
Right, that time works good for me. Scott, how's it look for you?
Yeah, that'll work for me. Thank you.
Okay.
So we'll send out an invitation so you can lock it into your calendars, and we'll just make that a set at 0900 hours that we'll have these meetings, and we'll start having them quarterly.
Sounds good. Yep. Any other comments? Okay, business is now concluded. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay.
Karen Sutherland, second.
Okay, we've been motioned and seconded. I'll go down the roll call. Channel PD.
You don't have to have a roll call.
Okay, are there any no's? I'm sure there's no no's. All right, the meeting is concluded, and we'll see you all December 2nd.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.